I'm here in Manchester for a national hustings organised by the disabled community. Only last month, the charity Sense found that nearly half of disabled people in the UK feel they aren't important to political parties. 1 in 4 don't think that life will actually improve for disabled people under a new government. So what do those who are fighting for your vote say they will do to help disabled people and improve the public services we all rely on? I've been to find out. In 6 weeks of campaigning, we've heard a lot about immigration, tax, and even national service.
Morning, how are you?
But there has been little focus on something that affects 1 in 5 of us. There are 16 million disabled people in the UK. That is a huge community that is often left out of the conversation when it comes to politics. To address this, these activists are calling for politicians to listen to their views, because the quality of public services makes an enormous difference to the lives of disabled people. Do you think people with disabilities are listened to by politicians?
Politicians don't always listen to people with learning disabilities. When they talk about social care, they talk about older people, but they don't talk about people with a learning disability.
You need to fight for your right to have a voice and to be heard and to be noticed.
By not talking to us, they're missing out on millions of votes because there's lots of people with a disability out there. They need to be thinking about issues like healthcare, social care funding, employment.
So, time to go and put these points to the main political parties to find out what they have to offer. For the last 3 weeks, we've been trying to tie down interviews with parties on the campaign trail. So today, I am travelling up and down the country to catch a moment with them. I want to find out what they've got to offer for disabled voters. First up, it's the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper, who I'm meeting in a local wildlife trust garden. Yes. So how many disabled candidates does your party have?
That's a very good question. I don't actually know the numbers on that. Of our existing MPs, we have 1 MP with a hidden disability, and that's me. That's partly what motivates me to campaign on disability rights in Parliament.
So will your party provide appropriate education for our disabled children?
The first thing we would do is we would reduce the amount of money that a school has to pay before they're eligible for additional funds to pay for special educational needs support for children in mainstream schools, because I'm very acutely aware that there's a whole generation of children that are going to lose out.
So how will you make the benefit system fairer for our disabled people so no one is stuck in poverty?
So the very first thing we've said is that we want to make sure that when people claim for universal credit, they can access that within 5 days, not 5 weeks. We know that it's often a very distressing process at the moment, and it's a real barrier for some people to do it on their own.
Disabled people can feel like a political football when people use language that make us look and feel bad. How will you change this?
I'm aware of some people, some politicians, who talk about people on welfare being scroungers and things like that. And I think it's incumbent on every politician in every political party to make sure that they're using responsible and empowering language to talk about every single person in our society.
The Lib Dems are unlikely to win the general election, and I wanted to talk to the party who have been in power. But despite having 3 weeks to confirm a date, the Conservative Party were unable to find the time for anyone to speak to me. Looking at their manifesto, They say they will make this the most accessible place in the world for disabled people to live, work and thrive. They say they will also tackle an unsustainable rise in benefits. But if you believe in the polls, then it's Labour who will form the next government. So I'm on my way to Manchester to meet Ali McGovern, who is in the Shadow Department for Work and Pensions. So how many disabled candidates does your party have?
I don't know off the top of my head, but many. And obviously we have lots of ways in which we will make sure that disabled people are included in policy making and that we reflect their rights in everything that we do.
I just want to ask you a question, and it's a simple one. It is a yes or a no. Would your party commit to incorporating the UN Convention of the Rights of Disabled People into UK law?
I know that the UN has reported on the state of disabled people's rights in the UK, and we want to learn all of the lessons of that. We're not in those terms at the moment, but I just wanted to read, if I may, the line in Labour's manifesto on this very point, because we are committed, and I'm quoting here, to championing the rights of disabled people and to the principle of working with them so that their views and voices will be at the heart of all we do.
Is that a yes or a no?
Our commitment is to work with disabled people. When it comes to the law, we want to make sure that the Equality Act is there for disabled people.
Keir Starmer has said, if you can work, you should work. So, are you committed to funding the support required to help disabled people find jobs?
Our job centres, I don't think they give people nearly enough personalised support. And I think that if you've got a health condition or a disability, that help should be there tailored to you, specifically for you. That is going to be the best way to improve the employment rate of disabled people. We know that there's a connection between disability and the risk of poverty. So we're going to review universal credit, look at it and say, does this actually help people into work? Does this actually help tackle poverty? And we're going to have a cross-government plan to deal with that.
And today, this is the first national...
So we heard from the three main parties who I invited for interview. But what about the others? Well, looking at the manifestos, Reform have said that they will introduce a medical assessment to prove eligibility for benefits, but will exempt those with severe disabilities. The Greens are promising to increase disability benefits by 5%. They will also ensure disabled people are supported at work and that all disabled children get free transport to school. So there you have it. The parties have made their promises. Now it's over to the voters to decide who they can trust to govern the country.
Ruben Reuter reporting there. Well, joining me now from Glasgow is David Linden, who is the SNP social justice spokesman. Thanks very much for joining us. A quick question we heard Ruben Reuter ask the other parties in that report. How many of your candidates have a disability?
I think off the top of my head, it's probably about 4 or 5. You'll be aware that the SNP was one of the main parties in Westminster that got proxy voting in place because a number of our MPs have got physical disabilities. Many of them, of course, are seeking re-election. The absolute trailblazer for that was Amy Callaghan, whose own health journey has been widely documented. So we are certainly aware of quite a number of candidates, and we're giving them the support that they require.
Given that, it's interesting that in the SNP manifesto, it only has one sentence specifically on disabled people. I mean, if that's a sign of intent or commitment, it doesn't show much of either, does it?
Well, I think what you've got to do is look at the track record of the SNP. For example, when I've been on the Working Pensions Select Committee for the SNP, all throughout the pandemic, arguing about the fact that the 2 million people on legacy benefit claims, those claimants who've got a disability, were cruelly overlooked by the UK government when it came to the £20 a week universal credit uplift. It was the SNP that was the vanguard leading the cause for that. Similarly, we've been calling for an end to the unfair assessment process. I'll give you just one example, Cathy. When I became an MP, I remember having one constituent who was asked if their son still had autism. That gives you an idea of the level of understanding that exists in the Department of Work and Pensions. I believe there's got to be a fundamental root and branch review of the UK government's approach to disabled people, because we've seen not once, not twice, but many times.
A fundamental root and branch review might necessitate more than one phrase specifically on disabled people in your manifesto. Your own disability spokesperson, Marion Fellows, was asked whether that one direct reference was enough to address all the complex problems that you mentioned some of them there, and she said it definitely isn't. You don't agree with her?
No, I think absolutely there's so much more that anybody who in the disability sector who we've worked with will know that the SNP has been a strong voice for those with disabilities. Manifestos, by their very nature, don't touch every single area of policy. If you want to get into chatting about the £975 disability premium that disabled people face, I'm very happy to talk about that, because we know, for example, that disabled people have got higher costs when it comes to running equipment that is supporting their lives. They've got higher energy costs, higher food costs because of a specialised diet. Higher transport costs as well. So these are all things that the SNP is interested in taking forward with the UK government, and that's why people should vote SNP, to ensure there's a strong voice to hold Sir Keir Starmer and his Labour government.
Sorry to cut across, we really don't have much time. Can I just ask you one more? You're the social justice spokesperson, and the SNP talk a lot about child poverty. The former Prime Minister Gordon Brown has said your record on child poverty has just not been good enough. Whatever the SNP has done, it's clearly not enough.
Well, I think Gordon Brown should reflect on the fact that his party is more interested in lifting the banker's bonus cap rather than the two-child cap for working mothers, all the while the SNP has lifted 90,000 children out of poverty with its game-changing Scottish Child Payment. I'm not sure Gordon Brown remembers that, but I'm certainly happy to remind Channel 4 viewers.
David Linden, thank you very much for talking to us today. Sorry it was so brief. Thank you very much.